Okay, that was great, and we're going to keep it going for Mr. Jeff Rose. So excited I threw my... Hey, Jeff.
When I was a kid, my grandmother told me that my middle name was entirely made up. She told me that my middle name, which was her last name, the name is Pilent, did not exist until around 1700 when a man showed up at a census, and when they asked him his name, he just said, Pilent, Pilant, and they wrote it down, and that was where this entire span of liars came from. Now, I later found out that actually my grandma's story was not true at all. That that the name actually is English. But I personally always liked the story that the name was fake. So therefore, I always imagined that the way she described it was actually the way that it happened. My grandmother, actually, she liked ice cream, she liked candy, and she liked dominating conversation. And I enjoyed listening to all of her stories. And my mom would tell me, I don't think she actually listens to her own stories. But I would sit there and listen to them with rapt attention. There was one that she told me that was my favorite of all time, and it was about her first pregnancy. And the way the story went was that my grandfather used to go around to all of the different neighbors in the place where they lived and help them with their houses. And one of the neighbors was an old fortune teller who was retired, who lived there with her daughter. And one day when my grandfather was out front painting the house, the fortune teller's daughter came out and said, my grandmother would like to give you a reading because we know that your wife is pregnant and it's just to be nice. And my grandfather was pretty no nonsense. So he said, okay, well, a gift is a gift, but whatever. So they went by that night dressed in their Sunday best. And the old fortune teller met him in back with a little globe. And the fortune teller looked at the ball and the fortune teller said, I don't understand. And my grandmother said, well, what, is there something wrong with the baby? And the fortune teller's face got white. She said, I don't understand. I can't see your pregnancy past the 7th month. And my grandma goes, is there something I need to do? Am I going to be okay? And the fortune teller goes, I can't see it past the 7th month. And then my grandfather was like, well, this is bullshit. He said, even if you really can tell the future, maybe don't tell a pregnant woman that you can't see your pregnancy past 7. So he stormed out, and they didn't go back for, planning forever. And the pregnancy went on, and it was a lot of complications in her head, but actually she was healthy. Doctors came and went. My grandfather took care of her. And eventually the 7th month came and went, and the baby was fine. After 9 months, my Uncle Johnny, beautiful baby. So my grandfather felt bad, so he went back to the fortune teller's house, and he said, he knocked on the door, and the daughter answered the door, and he said, hey, I wanted to apologize for storming out. I wanted to let you know our baby's born. And the daughter said, well, my mom passed away 2.5 months ago. So I've carried this story with me, and I've told it a lot since then, because my grandma told it to me, and I loved it. And, in my 20s, I didn't talk to her so much. I moved around a lot. I moved around the country. I went here, there. I worked for myself, lived in a bunch of different cities. Sometimes maybe didn't give my real name when I was asked what my real name was, but in general, I've enjoyed myself. But as it turns out, as you get older, one of the first lessons you learn is that all the other adults in your life are getting older too, which you don't see when you're a kid. So eventually I had to go home because my grandmother was in intensive care. And when I met with my mom, she said, her memory's fading and she doesn't remember everything like she used to. And I said, that's fine. And she asked me to tell her some stories Grandma had told her. I talked to my mom, and I told her the fortune teller story. And my mom said that she'd never heard that story before. So when we went to the hospital, my grandmother was still happy and was still talking to all of the nurses, and everyone liked her there. And I sat down next to her, and my mom brought up the fact that, Jeff told me a story about a fortune teller. I've never heard it before. And my grandma said that she didn't remember the story. And so I said, well, sure you do. It was about your first pregnancy. And so I sat there and I told her the story about her first pregnancy and about how my grandfather took care of her and how he got angry and how he yelled at the people and how later, after all the worry, my Uncle Johnny was born, and told the story to her. And she sat there quietly and listened to the whole story and got a little smile on her face. And at the end of it, she looked at me and she said that she remembered the story and that it was exactly how it happened.